Hey everybody, Minion Soldier here, Piracy Show, let's go. So basically what happened yesterday is we ended up with a load of Widow that we couldn't really unload. We couldn't sell it because the interface was bugged. So now we have returned to Grim Hex with the hopes of selling it. Now I am wearing the pirate heavy armor, and you're going to notice that I keep looking at this. I keep doing this kind of a downward look where every time I kind of step forward in the pirate heavy armor, that neck piece, that neck protector in the armor kind of keeps moving in front of my view, especially if I have the camera tilted downwards. And I was kind of wondering what was causing this because, you know, it just seems like every time my character stopped, I would, I'd be facing a certain way, but then I would then kind of turn another way. So I kind of hopped out and I said, okay, now I'm walking forward and then I turn. I walk forward, I stop, and then I turn. And that's why it keeps sweeping in front of the cameras. I guess the way the animations go is that when you stop walking, you immediately strike a bit of a pose. you know, Hello, I am a pirate and I'm standing with my left shoulder slightly forward. I don't know. I don't know how it became that. I don't know. I mean, is that something that we do in real life that I've just never done? I mean, I've always just stopped walking. I never, like, kind of hit a pose. So, I don't know. But it was just something that the more and more I was playing on this character with this armor suit, the more that became visible to me, especially when I was interacting with different objects. Now, the overall kind of there it is again. The overall infringing nature of the view on the heavy pirate armor, I really don't mind it that much. I used to mind it a little bit more, but I think it was a little bit more severe in previous versions of Star Citizen. Like the area that the heavy armor took up back in the old days was a little bit, yeah, there it is again, is a little bit heavier. And now it seems to be a little more towards our periphery. So it really kind of doesn't bother me that much with the heavy armor. And I guess if you're going out and you're specifically looking for a heavy suit of armor to protect yourself, especially if you're an assault trooper or you're going in first and you want that added protection, then it kind of makes sense. Now the price that we're getting here for the Widow is only 100. We paid 83 for it, not really the price that we want to sell it at, so we're going to hang on to it. But what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of go off and look for another pirate mission to do. But yeah, getting back to the heavy suit of armor, I kind of, I understand the benefits to it. And I understand that it is a situational thing, especially the way that we have different armor suits set up. So, as cool as it looks on the outside, and obviously the benefits in combat would be great, the frequency of armed combat in the current version of Star Citizen, especially on foot, isn't so high, or at least I don't try to create situations where that likelihood is very high. So in the end, I kind of decide to take the suit off. Overall, I'm going to be doing a lot of running around, a lot of, retrieving things and whatnot. So, I had already put the medium chest piece on, but I thought, the stamina impact, all of that, why not just go whole hog and just put on the lighter medium set of armor and just, kind of be, 1 foot in both camps, so to speak. Have a little bit more ability to run and not, have all that obstruction to our view, especially when we're looking down and interacting with objects, which, if we're doing missions, is something that we're going to be doing quite a bit. So I quickly, just check. There's my sniper rifle without a scope on it. And, yeah, my assault rifle. Good enough. All right. Now, what I had done earlier is I had selected a mission, and I was hoping that this was going to be a mission that would allow me to find a new criminal site, possibly a place where you might be able to buy other things. I mean, there could be illegal arms, who knows? There could be all kinds of different things that they sell at these different sites. So I kind of want to hit up as many of these as I can now, especially now that we're in a position where the game is so stable that we're not really just kind of stabbing out, trying to do a mission real quick and get back before the game crashes on us. Now we can get multiple hours of gameplay. And I mean, even this session that I'm editing down, obviously, was over an hour long. So I mean, we now have a little bit more freedom to go out and explore and do different things. So kind of building on what I did with the, finding the cookhouse and purchasing all the drugs and then selling them, I'm now going out and exploring and trying to find other things of that nature. So I'm headed out to another site, which once again is on Yella, and I'm going to check out what's available there, if there is anything beyond the original mission. Now, the site itself isn't really all that amazing. It's the typical pickup site. Generally, these missions that based out of this site or other sites that are similar to it end up with pick up the drugs here, deliver them to Grim Hex, or pick up this stolen item and deliver it to a certain safe house. So there really isn't going to be much of an opportunity in here to purchase anything else that we can market elsewhere. However, the drop-off location is on Chelon, so hopefully by the time we get there, we may find ourselves in a situation where even though we're dropping off the goods, we still might be able to pick something up at that location and then return it and sell it at Grim Hex. And, sometimes like when I want to get in and kind of get moving, I'll draw my weapon to drop the crate in my ship. And yes, those things still take kind of an unpredictable path. And at times they can injure you just a little bit. But it's just one of those little oddities that'll probably be fixed in a future version of the game. Now, by the time we get to Chelon, we find ourselves in an all too familiar situation, which is this site that we're landing at is not an actual base. This is one of the drop sites. Sometimes when you go pick up something on this moon or that moon, you'll find what looks like an airdrop, like a bunch of crates that were dropped out of, like sort of like, what is it, a C-15 or whatever, C-5 Galaxy. I forget the exact designation of it, but one of those big military cargo planes that drops, those big pallets on parachutes into combat zones. When you get missions that are either to deliver or pick up from, these locations, or even missions involving crashed ships, you can frequently find yourself in a situation like this where you have no ground references and it makes it very difficult to land. And terrain not being uniformly flat on all these worlds, that can sometimes leave you in a bit of a situation. And one of the things I was kind of thinking of is, what would really help in the future is possibly like having like a gimbaled searchlight. Especially on something like the Cutlass, you have all these other fixtures that are hanging off the bottom of the ship. Possibly just having like a couple of little mini gimbaled searchlights that could either spin around in a predetermined pattern or just give you better visibility in a situation like this so that when you're landing, you can see much more easily, especially in a location like this where it's almost completely black and the landing lights on your ship are so insufficient that by the time you get to the ground, that's when you start to see the ground. Something like that might be a decent improvement worth visiting in the future. Now, the mission itself is just a straight up, drop this thing off at this location. Here's 155 UEC. Thanks for your time, yada, yada, yada. No big deal. But when you're kind of running around and you're doing this mission, you start to kind of think about things and you kind of go, well, you know what, doing this mission, let's say I've got, Cutlass Black, Avenger Titan, Freelancer. I have different options once I complete this mission. Yeah, you know what? It's only 155 UEC, but I can go take that 155 to a nearby location after I complete this mission, pick up some goods. Like, let's say I can go to the hydroponic farm that's not too far away from this site. I can go buy fill up my ship with booze and with stims, and then sell those at different respective locations where they'll be most profitable. And so even though I only make the 155, I have the option, depending on the ship that I'm flying, I have the option to take that 155 and immediately, make more money out of that. Whereas, like, if you're flying a fighter, those options aren't really open to you. Like, let's say you're in a Super Hornet or you're in a Sabre, those options really aren't open to you. Now, some people say, well, if you're flying a fighter, you want to be doing space combat missions. You don't want to be doing that sort of stuff anyway. But the income potential, especially with the missions that we have now, the income potential of the Sabre pilot or the Super Hornet pilot are much, much lower than someone who has an Avenger Titan, because they have better facilities and they have more options available to them right away. And it kind of puts me in this weird position where am I looking at ships like the Sabre and the Super Hornet, and am I thinking that those are now situational ships that you kind of keep off to the side just in case you need them, in case you need a really dominant fighter for this, that, or the other thing? And day in, day out, our ships like the Avenger Titan, the Cutlass, and the Freelancer are going to be everybody's bread and butter in Star Citizen. It's an interesting question. I just find it kind of funny in a way that when the Buccaneer came about, and the whole reason why the Buccaneer came about, was, it was going to be the light pirate fighter, and, a little bit of cargo, a little bit of smuggling, a gun rack, just some handy dandy features. And, and when those features got kind of set aside, a lot of people are like, oh, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. But here we are now in a situation where you can see kind of is a big deal, because those features would have opened up options for that fighter. Whereas, like, the Cutlass has become just this omni-useful ship. And I would honestly say that if someone wanted to spend, let's say someone came up to me and said, hey, I've got $115 to spend. I want to get into Star Citizen. What do you recommend? Cutlass Black Package. Cutlass Black Package, hands down. Opens up so many options for you. I mean, like, I've taken this thing into a little bit of combat as well, and I shot down one guy in a Buccaneer, which is kind of funny. Now, I can tell you, obviously, that this person was probably still getting used to their controls when they attacked me, so there were certain traits in the way that they were flying that kind of told me that, okay, I'm dealing with this kind of pilot, so I know how to handle this situation. But even if we had both been absolutely on our A game, if I've got somebody in the turret who's on top of their shit, and I've got somebody in the co-pilot seat managing systems and shields who's also on top of their shit, I think that's still going to be a tight confrontation. That's not going to be, like, oh, he's more maneuverable, you're dead. There's a lot of room to debate how that fight would turn out. And so, in all honesty, it was kind of, removing those features from the Buccaneer, which kind of marginalized the Buccaneer and kind of solidified the Cutlass Black's position, in my eyes, as probably the best all-around starter ship in the game. Avenger Titan, if you're looking to come in on more of a budget, I think, what is it? Like, if you buy an Aurora MR game package, that's $45 US. And I think to upgrade that to an Avenger Titan, which is the Avenger that has 6 SCU of cargo space, that's another $25, right? But, so $70 in total to get into an Avenger Titan. But for $115, you get 46 SCU of cargo space. You get a competent combat vessel. You get cargo. You've got so many more options open to you than any of the other ships. All the fighters look pretty flashy, and they all look kind of slick. Some of them have good cockpits, some of them don't. But in the end, it's this ship. And it's ships like the Freelancer. I mean, even the Reliant Core, even though I have some misgivings about the weapon placement on the Reliant Core is, I think, a better starter ship than most fighters are, because it has those options, And taking those options away from the Buccaneer, I think, kind of put the Buccaneer on the back burner at least until we see what this interdiction mechanic that it's supposed to have is all about. Now, of course, it's not all doom and gloom for fighters, right? And that's not the point of this video, but just kind of illustrating that, if you got fighters, your options aren't really as broad as you might want them to be. But there is another option. Whereas, like, let's say you have a ship like the Cutlass Black. Let's say you're like me, you have the Cutlass Black, and you have a few fighters. You have a smattering of fighters, but maybe now that, apart from, say, limited situations where maybe you need that well-placed EMP, or maybe you need that, that interdiction, whatever it ends up being, generally you might be looking at your fighters and saying, well, they're just going to be sitting in my hangar and I'm not sure if I really want them. Maybe you do want to hold on to them because you can stick NPCs in those fighters. So if you think about it, like, I'm running around right now in my Cutlass Black, I'm making money, and I'm making a pretty decent chunk of money. If the economy stays the way it is, then chances are all this money that I'm making, that could also pay to maintain those fighters and to keep NPCs in those fighters to protect me as I'm going from point A to point B. In a way, I could kind of say, oh, I'll just be on my Cutlass Black with me and a couple of friends from the org, and we'll be out, making money, doing things, this, that, the other thing, whatever comes up. But we'll also have this added NPC protection, these bodyguards looking out for us in the back. So, that makes it a little less likely that people might get brave and attack us while we're trying to, make our cash. And so maybe the fighters will see their use as more of like a personal bodyguard system rather than a ship that you would fly day in and day out. Now, ships like the Buccaneer, because we've been using that as the example, the Buccaneer, it might be somewhat of a disappointment how it turned out, but, if I'm out with my Cutlass Black and I'm just trying to make money, though, that Buccaneer, as an added feature of security while I'm out doing these things, when I was talking about NPCs and having them as kind of like bodyguards, having a couple of them just being wingmen, just to dissuade any, perhaps brave individual from interfering with my business, might be a good idea as well. So even though the Buccaneer didn't turn out quite the way we wanted it to, it might see a second life as a cheap and easy to maintain escort ship for our much more useful ships like the Cutlass Black, the Freelancer, the Connie, and moving on up through all the other ships. The Buccaneer may see a very useful life in that area. As a personal ship to go around and make money, not so much, but I think overall, as protection for a big ship like this, I think that you could still get a lot of mileage and a lot of use out of a very cheap and easy to maintain fighter like that. Now, in the past, with certain videos, I've definitely talked about the cockpit view, and I have, beaten that dead horse so many times. And kind of one of the reasons why I keep picking on this topic is, I realize that, there are some people out there who are like, oh, it's not that big a deal. I don't see what the big problem is, yada, yada, yada. And fine. That's okay. Like, you don't have to see it that way. You can get into the pilot seat and just say, dude, works for me. I have certain objections to the way it's laid out. I think it could be done better. And in fact, on the Cutlass, it is kind of done better. Hop into the co-pilot seat, and it's a completely different experience. Also, I mean, you could just say adjust the height on your seat, much in the same way in your car. You can reach around down to the side and just adjust the height of your seat, and that could help things out a little bit. But the fact that there's a joystick there tells me that at some point in the future, hopefully, we're going to be able to assign piloting functions to that seat. Maybe we can swap the functions of the front seat and the back seat around so that a pilot can sit in the second seat, or what would normally be the co-pilot seat, and the co-pilot can sit down in the front. And that kind of totally resolves the issue and puts the issue to bed, because now you have those options. And it's at times like this that I miss old shows like 10 for the Chairman, 10 for the Producers, 10 for the Designers, or the old Reverse the Verse when, like Travis Day or Darian Vorlick would pop on. And you could ask questions like this. And even if they couldn't give you a direct answer, they could kind of give you kind of just an idea of the spirit of what they were going for. And it's in the absence of, those kinds of sources of information that, I find that conflict arises out of, some of these unanswered questions, or, these questions that just kind of don't get any real guidance anymore. And I wish that those old shows were back. Even Wingman's Hangar, I wish that were still around. I wish that were still a thing, because it gave you a good idea of what they were going for. They couldn't give you all the ones and zeros. They couldn't give you the A to Z, but they could kind of generally, in a very general way, kind of paint a picture for you to give you a better idea of what they were hoping to achieve. And that's something that I think that we really miss. And kind of not having those things kind of leaves us flailing about in limbo. Anyways, that's the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will go back to flailing about.